Hello everybody, welcome to the Data Defender Forum episode number 4. In this episode, we will speak about large language models that are all the rage today. They are so powerful that something that their impact may be comparable to the Industrial Revolution. And so while they will bring a lot of opportunities, they will also bring challenges. In today's episode, we will discuss the security and compliance risks that are emerging because of them. We are joined by Teleskope co-founder Lizzie Nammour and Julie Trias. Lizzie, Julie, welcome to the show. So let's jump right in. Can you tell me about your background and what basically you are working on today? Julie, let's start by you.
Sure. A little bit about me. First of all, thanks for having us on your show. I started my career in the United States Army Signal Brigade. And after getting hurt on active duty and retiring out, I decided to become a software engineer and became a Linux kernel developer at the Wikimedia Foundation before eventually finding my way to Airbnb, joining the systems engineering team and eventually becoming the first SRE there. And then that's where I met Lizzie. I eventually, after a few years at Airbnb, I joined the production security team. So I got to work with her really closely. Most recently, I was a lead engineer in the Salesforce security team and a CISO at River Financial before starting Telescope with Lizzie.
Oh, very cool background. SRE team here. I used to be an SRE as well.
Oh, right on.
Small world. Yeah, it's a small community. So always nice to meet someone from the crew. Lizzie, how about you?
Yeah, I guess my career is much shorter. So I studied computer science at Penn. During that time there, I worked at Amazon and Booz Allen as software engineers, but then joined Airbnb right after college. Worked there for 4.5 years on the data security team. So that's where we kind of felt the struggles and the pain points of like securing and automating security at scale across a company that was just like growing so rapidly. And yeah, we felt the growing pains there. So we ended up building a security platform to automate not just security, but compliance. And then that's where we got the idea to start Telescope as well.
Nice.
Yeah.
So both of you work for large corporations where security has always been a concern. And as you brought up lately, like compliance is kind of the growing topic that everybody's afraid about. Really, GDPR kind of started the whole thing, but now you have like 70% of the countries in the world at some sort of data laws, and so it's here to remain. Can you tell us about how did you came about creating Telescope? The company just raised a pre-seed of 2 million. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
How did you get to the idea, and how did you think about tell us how you went about this?
So we realized that like not just at Airbnb, but most companies were tackling compliance manually. And there's 2 reasons for that. One, like these compliance laws were written by like lawmakers. So they didn't really think about like how systems are truly architected in the first place. So security teams and compliance teams in that race for compliance, they just ended up adding a bunch of manual controls and manual friction on not just security, but all engineers, like even platform engineers, like infrastructure engineers, data engineers. And we realized that what we built at Airbnb was pretty generic, right? Like it's not just Airbnb that needed such a platform. Like all companies that are tasked with compliance have to need such a platform because the manual work just doesn't scale. So we decided to start a company around it to help those companies not just automate security at scale, but help them reduce that manual overhead that they're already doing for compliance.
Yeah. And to add to that, we decided to build it even though we had the budget to buy tools out there to tackle the problem, right? but none of them were good enough for our use case, especially with developer friendliness. A lot of the tools that we tried were they had a lot of false positives, and we couldn't really automate on top of them because they are not meant to be used by engineers. So that's why we decided to build our own.
Mm-hmm. Very insightful. Yeah, like the space is such, it's complicated because, as you say, Lizzie, it's like a bunch of low people who generally have no clue, and for good reason, no clue of their engineering world, and then like ultimately who end up manipulating the data, storing it, and like basically doing what could be right or wrong are engineers.
Yeah.
And so the gap, whether it's knowledge or communication or culture gap between as these two group of people is pretty huge.
Exactly. And like, especially like as the cloud came about, engineers started like any engineer, right, could start creating and transmitting data. So when these laws came of saying, hey, you need to know where all of your data is, a lot of people were like, what? Like, we have no idea, because engineers can do whatever they want, right? So they can send data out, they could create a new database whenever they wanted to. They could start collecting new information without notifying anyone. So you kind of have this like security versus like product development, and they were kind of at odds.
So what comes like large language models? Like, what do you think are the new challenges that they present in terms of security and compliance, and what opportunities also they offer?
I think for security, there's like big issues around them. Like, one is obviously, since everyone is using ChatGPT, even my mom is using ChatGPT, people are sending like sensitive information and not even thinking twice about whether that data could be leaked, whether it would be a hack on OpenAI, or whether someone like OpenAI training their models on that new information also could present challenges in terms of like privacy around the data. You have other security issues like people like putting bad data on purpose, or like injecting, like figuring out like bad URLs and injecting them as well so that they could like, scam people. There's like a bunch of security issues that we're seeing. What about you, Julie?
Yeah.
So what do you think? What do you think companies should do about that? Is there any specific like tools, best practices, Julie? I think you are listening.
Yeah, so I've been part of conversations in companies internally about this, right? There are many issues, and like one of them is what Lizzie mentioned, is people don't think twice about putting like a name there to help them maybe compose an email and other types of PII. That one, you could put something like Telescope scan, classify, and redact API before you send data to like a generative or open AI. That way you have that privacy concern covered. But I think a bigger issue is that these large language models have hallucinations, right? Like you mentioned, like Lizzie mentioned, there are a lot of data that gets fed in that is meant to be destructive, or is intentionally for doing harm. So we have to be careful about that, and ethically, and in terms of intellectual property. When companies internally have these conversations between compliance and legal teams, the main concern is that when you use ChatGPT in your work, how does intellectual property play into that? Do we lose our intellectual property because this is generated by an open API? So the common answer is that if we use generative AI to create source code or content for us, if we just like slightly tweak it, then we have intellectual property on that. But that's still a gray area, right? So intellectual property plays a big role, not with using generative and open AI.
Lizzie, you have something to add to that?
I think the most secure thing you could do is like host it on-prem. Like I think a lot of companies are going that approach, hosting their own models, let's say either using OpenAI's private hosting or like just hosting another large language model on-prem is probably the most secure in terms of data leakage. You would still have those hallucinations from the data that it was trained on, but and as well as if it keeps getting updated from the main branch as well, you might get those new hallucinations as well. But
yeah,
so
all the rage is all about the data. So ultimately, if you have control over it, if it's at least stored in a location that's yours, doesn't mean it's secure and compliant, but at least it's here, and you know, like, right, who can access it legally at the very least.
And it's all on you, right? Like you can't, you can't. You're not trusting a third-party vendor. You're trusting yourself to like host it properly.
So, coming back to Teleskope, like, how are you assisting your customer, with this issue or related, compliance issue, and how are they dealing with it?
So with Telescope, we can help prevent actual personal and sensitive information from being sent to those AI models, but not just AI. I think any third party, right? Like you don't want your sensitive data going to logs either. So it's a similar use case. You don't want your data going to OpenAI. So they could plug us in using an API and redact all their sensitive information before it gets sent to that third party. And so that could be either through a Chrome extension or plugging us through the logging aggregator. That's where we would basically scrub the data inline and potentially replace it with like fake values of the same type of data. That way you could still use those platforms and still gain value from them, but you wouldn't be sending data out, sensitive data out.
So how is the filtering happening in terms of, like, if you can go a little bit more technical and explain how
So we use a combination of different models, some large, some smaller, depending on the type of data that we're processing. So we have a very generic approach where we first have a model that determines what type of data is it. Is it conversational, natural language data, or is it like a structured table where every field is like one word along with the metadata such as the table name and the column name? Or is it a code file, or is it like a log file? And once we know what type of data it is, we then route it to a model specifically trained on that data to detect sensitive information. So we can detect first names, emails, addresses, medical diagnoses, over 120 PII, PCI, PHI elements. And we go with this multi-model approach because it allows us to use smaller models to tackle a smaller subset of tasks and retain the same accuracy that you would get from the very large language models. And that's because like when you're processing terabytes or even petabytes of data, very large language models start to suffer because they're too slow and then too costly to run.
Yeah. So are you hosting this engine on Teleskope infrastructure? Is part of it hosted in-house at the customer? Like, how is it architectured?
I could answer that. So we do host it ourselves. We train our models all the time, and we have a single tenant architecture, which means, for context, we deploy an AWS account to host every customer's instance of Teleskope. So never multi-tenant, even though we don't make a copy or store customer data. And within that single tenant deployment comes the LLMs that we use for classification.
And so we also deploy it on-prem as well. So since we have this single tenant basically like microservice architecture. The scanners can even live like in the customer's account, or everything could live in the customer's account. We can mix and match whatever with whatever they want, but basically it's either single tenant or we can deploy it on-prem or a mix of both.
Got it. So it's
Really?
quite emerging, especially in this type of product. In a former episode, we spoke about a new concept that's called private SaaS.
Okay. Yeah, exactly.
It's
Yeah.
it, right? Where it's the same product, you get the same, like benefit of, hey, we build the product for you, we update the product for you, but the data plan is in, potentially an account that's controlled by you. As you say here, if it's an AWS account, whether it's managed by Teleskope or the customer, at the end of the day, it's the same.
Exactly. It's the same thing. So we can handle the whole deployment, do everything for the customer, but they still have that guarantee that it's still in their environment and they have control over it.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Okay. And so what, speaking about the money, it's all about the money. What do you think are the costs associated with dealing or not dealing with this security and compliance risk that come with generated AI? The number might be hard to pinpoint, but do you have like a rough idea of what we are talking about?
Yeah, I mean, Julie can answer and I can give it.
Sorry, I was gonna ask a question. Like, were you asking about how much it costs to run generative AI or use
Breach.
generative AI, or a breach? Okay.
Yeah, breach. I think we can discuss all of those. I think the would be interested. I think all of this is very novel. So everything, right? Like you can share all these numbers.
It's pretty hard to pinpoint, right? Because it all depends on the number of like customer records that you've obviously lost if there was a leak with OpenAI or with another generative AI model. Like it depends. It can go up to 10 to I don't know how much dollars per record lost, and that a record is one specific customer. So if you're uploading a very large data set and asking OpenAI to run some sort of analysis for you, then you're a lot more at risk than if you just copied one customer email and pasted it in there. And then there's obviously the associated risk of not just compliance risk, but security breaches. Like if there was a secret in there that could lead to you losing people hacking into your system, then again, it's pretty hard to quantify. But in general, the average cost of a breach, of every single breach per customer, per company, is $4 million.
Right. Yeah, this was I think IBM does a good job at pinpointing this, and I think it
exactly.
Or the global company, not even US. Yeah, it's 4.4. So it's and here we are, as you said, we're speaking employee feeding potentially way too much information in there. So who knows? Actually, generative AI might increase the number for next year.
Yeah, exactly. We don't know what the report is going to be like in 2023, 2024.
Yeah, that number might be much, much higher.
Just because I think so many people are using it, right? Not just one person, but every single person in the company is probably using generative AI in some way or another.
Yeah, no, it's even embedded in search engine. You might use it. You might even not know it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Microsoft integrated it in Skype. Which is old school, but and our mother or grandmother might still using it.
I'd be scared if Zoom added it. That would be very scary. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, there were a big controversy around this change of policy, but looked like it was scrapped away.
Yeah, they had to. Yeah.
So if we take a step back, this even though this type of models are not new, they are new in the sense that they've been very recently starting to be used by pretty much anyone, as you mentioned. So what do you think the future holds, in the next 5 to 10 years? How do you think they will impact the security and compliance landscape in the long run. Like, what's your vision of that?
Like in terms of like quality, like integrating LLMs into a specific product for like either for security or any other product, I think like we're at the height of it. People are realizing the limitations that comes with LLMs from like either like how smart it can be and to like how costly it is to run currently. And so I think in that terms, like I personally think we're at the height of people talking about how LLMs are impacting their product and making their product better. In terms of whether it's going to impact security and privacy in a bad way, I think like as people introduce new tools, like I'm sure when the cloud first came about, they had the same conversation around how it's going to impact security and privacy, and then people start to get a grip on it. So that's my personal opinion of like the conversation came very quickly with LLMs around their security and privacy risk, and so in a way, it's better than other tools. That existed. Yeah, because with the cloud, at the beginning, people either were too paranoid of putting any data in the cloud, like banks and stuff, or were just using the cloud without even thinking about whether it was secure or not. But now I think there's a lot of conversation, at least around the security and privacy risk of AI. Yeah.
And ethical use as well, right?
Yeah.
From my perspective, I think that there's always this historical ebb and flow in the use of artificial intelligence, right? Like from before 2013 or very early on, where it was done mainly for research, and then in the more recent years where it's been now being used for building things, right? And then I think there's going to be another wave there where we will go above and beyond just building. But I think we're a long way from that. But we are certainly past the research, but research continues to happen and will continue to happen. And we're in that era where we use AI to build things.
I think now it's a hype though, right? Like for us, for example, our product truly has always been on AI because like data classification has always been like an ML problem. But people are adding it sometimes and I'm like, is it really necessary to add this there? Like, do you really need this?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
It's true.
The government has cracked down actually on that. They go after like it was before this huge boom of generative AI, but the government was going after companies ensuring that the machine, like AI or machine learning, whatever terms they were using in their marketing product, was actually they wanted to check if it's true or not. So I think they're gonna double down their effort here.
False marketing, right? Like false advertising.
Yeah. It's machine learning, and behind it's a bunch of if-else statements.
Yeah.
One not.
Yeah.
Julie, you were mentioning another wave. Like, what is this a secret wave you don't want to share with us? Like, do you think there is a third step into this?
I think it's like it's going to be a different wave of building, right? Right now, people are trying to build smart things using artificial intelligence, right? And I think the wave that's going to come in a different way, which is a long way from now, will be like objective artificial intelligence, as Jan described it, which is going to play a big role in really catapulting, for example, selfless or driverless cars, right? Because right now they're very, very naive. They're not very smart. That's why, like, we predict, we're going to have, like, self-driving cars in a couple of years or 10 years. No, we're decades away from that because we don't have objective artificial intelligence. And
Yeah.
what I mean by that is uh, like more advanced, because right now it doesn't, it just knows what we feed it. It learns from what we feed it. It doesn't learn like a human being objectively, because we see and feel the world, whereas artificial intelligence, they don't see and feel the world like we do.
And it's gonna bring a new wave of type of like artificial intelligence. LLMs all have that specific naivete like from it. Like because they can only learn from like input. Yeah. And
I think what also people need to understand why like robots aren't taking over the world right now or anytime soon is because um, like toddlers or even infants are smarter than the smartest artificial intelligence right now. And it's because they get, you don't have to teach it, right? It just learns uh, because it has many inputs, environmental inputs. Um, and that's coming from, I don't know, infinite dimensions, from depth to environments to sound to um I don't know, taste, and all these things that artificial intelligence is not ingesting, and human beings, human brain are ingesting, and even animals are much smarter also than today's smartest artificial intelligence because of all these environmental factors that are input to the brain.
Julie, Lizzie, thank you for being here.
thank you so much for having us, Sylvain.